Welcome in, everybody, to Browns Film Breakdown postgame coverage of the Cleveland Browns loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns dropped to 3-12 on the season and are struggling week to week just to even be a competitive football team at this point. Jake, we went back and forth a little bit earlier about whether or not it makes sense to do a show like this in these sorts of circumstances. And just what we can even talk about when it's just a game that didn't feel competitive from start to finish. I can't hear you, buddy.
No, it didn't, and it became obvious pretty early to people who I think still want them to win that this is just not their goal. And, they can have some guys out there that obviously are going to matter in next year's team, but when you're making that decision at quarterback, you just are – you're putting everything into proper perspective. So nothing personally against Dorian. I just think if it's an offense that lacks, like Dorian can survive an offense that is driven by things that he doesn't have to drive. Like if you are leaning into him being a 35 throw quarterback in a game, 40 dropbacks, it's done. I mean, if you were like, hey, Dorian, we need you to run maybe 8 to 10 times. We're going to try to throw the football 15 to 20 times with you and run it effectively, ball control it, ugly game. We think we can win this way. Trust our kicker to kick some kicks through the uprights and some of that. You can see the vision, but this offense is still so lost from a cohesion standpoint that outside of the 66-yard run, which was a really nice run from Jerome Ford to open the game, they lack a consistent rushing attack that has a segmented play action and passing game off of it. And again, anytime you're dropping Dorian back 40 times in a game, it's just you're really telling your own team you're going to prepare to lose the football game. Could a miracle happen? Sure. They certainly wanted to based on the first play. And to the credit of the defense, Andrew, they gave up a 99-yard first drive for a touchdown. But after that, I thought they adjusted, got a little bit more aggressive in the back half of their defense and got after Burrow and tried to make him uncomfortable. And they did. It was 17 points for the Bengals largely into the fourth quarter until that whatever happened to Cameron Mitchell and that touchdown throw is just really slow off the football and it gets to 24. But I mean, that game wasn't really over. The Browns score there 17-6, can't make an extra point. 17-7 is what it should have been. And you're talking, I mean, like they had a throw into the end zone at that score, which we can talk about or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that game was close. It was really similar to the first Bengals game where it was close until the end, despite the score. Actually, the first one was a little less close as they scored late to make it look tighter, but neither of those games were like uncomfortable blowouts, even though you may have thought based on the fumble and first Bengals drive, this is where this game's going. I can already tell sort of feeling.
No, you're right, and the defense does deserve some credit for keeping them in these and not. One of the things that this Brown season has lacked, even as it has had plenty of losing and plenty of disappointment, is it has lacked many games that have felt like true blowouts. You go back to that Washington game; that game was over at halftime. There's been one or two, but week to week, the defense has played well enough to keep the Browns in these games, and that prevents, I think, some of the more negative consequences that sometimes roll out during a season, right? Because when you have teams getting blown out to a certain point, it kind of compels action. The Browns have been hanging around, but they are nevertheless right in the mix of things here, Jake, at 3-12 now. Really, I mean, if you're a Raiders fan, an absolutely shocking win for them this afternoon that all of a sudden puts them behind the Browns in draft positioning. Just no sense at all to lose that game if you're the Raiders. I know that Antonio Pierce maybe, probably coaching for his job, and there's some incentives for the players, obviously, but organizationally, just a really bad move for them, a team that needs a quarterback. So now the Browns are sitting at 5th because the Panthers also won in overtime against Arizona. So listen.
And other things worked out, Andrew. I mean, we talked about this on the last show, and it is a bummer to be talking about this.
Yeah, it sucks.
Sucked 2 weeks left, and this is our silver lining of the season.
5 minutes into the show, and we're talking draft pick.
Dolphins win, so they care. Their hopes are still alive, and then we know the Ravens will be fighting for the division the very last week of the year. So you are talking about 2 Browns losses. There's just with their starting Dorian, they said they're going to start
Browns
Dorian.
are 3-14.
They're a 3-14 team this year. So you are talking about 2 of those losses. Like I said, if Jameis was starting, you can really trick yourself into sort of seeing how it could happen if he
kept at times. Yeah.
Right. But the other end of the spectrum there, it's pretty ugly. But you're talking Tennessee and Jacksonville play next week, so you are looking at having probably the 4th pick in the draft. Granted, New England could still win one of their 2 games. I think they have the Colts remaining, maybe, or somebody.
They do. Colts and then the Bills again. So but the Bills might be locked into their seed for Week 18. So
very much
the Patriots are playing good football. I mean, I think they have a puncher's chance in both of these games in a way that I don't think. The Titans look totally checked out, even though they came back in that game, but they're bad. The Raiders one is really the one that I can't get over. I mean, the Giants feel like they've got the number 1 pick locked up, just in terms of not being close, playing Drew Lock at quarterback. They are locked in on having the 1st pick. And so they have 2 wins. So they've got that, even though one of their wins is over the Browns. They've got that sewn up. So that's number 1. And so you're hoping to get, I think, into that top 3, Jake, because at that point you really can, depending on who's in front of you. Like if it's the Jaguars in front of you, you don't worry about a quarterback going there. Maybe Jacksonville trades out, but for the most part, you feel comfortable about that. So same thing with New England. Being behind the Patriots isn't the worst thing in the world.
No, not at all. Chargers, they host the Chargers and the Bills. So like you said, the hope here is that they get the Bills with nothing to play for. Right. And I can't remember the Bills back. Is it like Matt Barkley or who did what's his name? Trubisky go back there? Honestly, I cannot remember.
That's a great question. Yeah.
I cannot remember.
The Bills backup quarterback? Couldn't tell you.
We'll have to know soon enough. But like we said, we're sitting in 5th. They have a 530 win percentage strength of schedule. That puts them in front of the Raiders as 545. So they're behind Jacksonville and Tennessee's strength of schedule 3-12 and New England's, which is at 463. So those are way off. They need losses. And it feels like one of those 2 teams near them are losing. Obviously they play next week, and then you're hoping New England on a coin flip loses a game there Week 18 that doesn't matter. So you're probably better favorite looking at the 4th pick. So it's not as bad as where we were talking about 7, 8, 9 as recently as a week or 2
top 5 is where you need to be in a season like this. So wanted to check in on that fairly high in the show, just in terms of what matters really from these games, because you can't take away a ton from the game. I guess where I would start in terms of game analysis, Jake, is, we talked in the pregame pod about what we thought this might be like for Dorian Thompson-Robinson making this start. And your principal concern was if the passing offense is so bad that the wide receivers who have looked good now kind of go back to being afterthoughts. Yeah. And it's exactly what happened. I mean, what you described being worried about is exactly what unfolded today in Cincinnati.
Yeah, Elijah Moore, 5 targets, 2 catches, 21 yards. That's the most receiver targets they had. 3 targets for Jerry Jeudy, 2 for 20. And he was open at times. We'll try to cover that in the coming days and show you some things where it's like, oh, he's open, not getting a chance that he was getting. And yeah, you're talking about 15 targets between David Njoku and Jerome Ford on check down opportunities and low throws and getting out of chaos and finding somebody in a scramble drill where it's helter-skelter. It's not a real offense. I mean, I like Dorian's a nice young man, but this is it. Like, you keep wondering, well, why wouldn't they give him a chance? People have been doing this for what feels like a while. And it's like, this is it. This is who he is. He can't play within structure. He can't process quick enough. He doesn't see the field well enough. He's inaccurate when pressure arrives. He can extend plays and he can run. And he had 9 carries for 49 yards. I know your bet there didn't start well because he was in the tent kind of beat up early. I didn't even know what happened. I put him in the tent, to be honest. Did you see? I missed it. I saw.
I totally missed it. I'm definitely watching this game, but my level of engagement snap to snap is a little lower at this point in the season, right? In terms of
should be
all the things that go into it. I'm flipping around, watching some other things as well, and trying to have
he
a
had
little
that
bit
second
more
down run.
Yeah.
I think there was a second down run on a read options sort of scheme. I didn't see what type of concept it was, but he pulled a ran for 8 yards. So I'm imagining that's where he got hurt. Then the next play, they get a first down, then Foreman fumbles, and he doesn't play the rest of the game. Shocker that a guy wouldn't play the rest of the game. That's also, I guess, a bit of shocker he's even out there anyway, but we digress. And that set the tone, man. I mean, that set the tone. You're talking about a huge run, and this is what you need. It's the sort of antithesis of what we talked about last week, where it's like you're playing in a meaningless game and you get the opening 3 and out, you get a punt return, you fumble the punt return, it sets the tone for the entire sloppiness that ensues. This is the same thing, but you need it on the other end. So you get maybe a couple big plays, and that springboards you into some confidence. You score a touchdown on the first drive, 5 plays, your defense is amped up. They play well off of it. But this is like the worst. It's it's the worst outcome of all of it, where you have this fumble on the 1 inch yard line, and it also is reviewable. And so it's the trifecta. Called a touchdown, reviewable, a narrow fumble where I thought his shin was down. Maybe it looked to me like he was down, but I guess he wasn't. And they also still had some way, that line of sight, to barely see Von Bell recover the football. Like it was like that. And then the Joe Burrow touchdown throw. I don't know if it was the next drive. I think it was the 99-yard drive where he sort of jumps in the air, but his knee was down. So I'm presuming they say he tripped over his own man, because I'm like, okay, his knee is definitely touching the ground with that ball in his hand. So yeah, I mean, it starts out in the worst way possible. And to their credit, after you get those sort of bemoaning thoughts about, well, they're going to get 40 burgered in this game, they fought, and there's credit there. It's just they continue to fourth quarter interceptions. They get in their own way. And really the story of the first half is they're down 17-0. There's two things I want to hit on, Andrew, with you, which is 18 plays, 20 yards. First play is a 66-yard run, 18 plays, 20 yards the rest of that half. And then what are they doing before half? Like, Cade York better than anyone. Why would you want to give him a chance to just punch it? Well, like, take a timeout and make him punt. I have no clue what you're thinking in terms of, like, why would you give them a free kick? Like, Cade's inaccurate. We know that, but he can also really drill it in a way many kickers can't. This is a guy you didn't know. I get it. But Cade can really hit it hard and has a shot at making that. So make him punt. Just a really weird, like, low pressure kick before the half to let happen. I don't understand that process.
Maybe Kevin's just fond of Cade as a person and wanted to give him a little practice there. Felt like it was a good opportunity in a game situation. Oh, he's on the other team. That's right. Okay. In that case,
also, evidence of tanking. Yeah, we're
right,
adding it to the list.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, the Jameson Winston phantom shoulder injury is the icing on the tanking cake. If you're looking for, like, are we sure? I mean, we use this word. Do we really want evidence? Yeah. When midweek, late week, all of a sudden your backup quarterback, who is by far the most talented quarterback on the roster, it's clear at this point, it develops a phantom shoulder injury because you're planning on running your starting quarterback, and you don't want to have to be in a situation where you're demoting Winston or where you're, it's very obvious. So, the tank is on, and that's why we started the show by talking about their draft position. Jake, just talking about the offense overall, I just wanted to share a statistic that, I was looking at today in terms of understanding this team and where they're at. They've got 26 offensive touchdowns for the season. So that's through 15 games now. So you're talking about, a touchdown and a half per game would be more than that. So it's around there. That's about where they're at. It's pretty frustrating. The offense has just been kind of listless all year long, and it doesn't. I know that they're not trying to win these games, but when you watch the way that they're playing, what they're doing doesn't feel connected to the skills of the players. The stuff that they were giving DTR didn't feel like it was stuff that made him feel comfortable. He didn't ever look settled until that one drive in the third quarter. There didn't feel like there were a ton of easy buttons in the offense for him as a young player. He, as a player, talking about player development, looks the same as he looked in week 4 against Baltimore last year. Like, all the same bad habits, all that stuff. Yeah. So you don't see any development of a player that they drafted in the 5th round. You would expect to some extent to improve over time. And I understand, again, there are reasons why they don't want to be winning these games. So I don't want to get too stuck in on they did a bad job in playing the game, but I just thought the plan offensively was really poor for a team that is trying to put a young quarterback in a position to succeed, ostensibly.
I mean, the question I would ask off of that is, are they? I really think that is a way you're probably tanking. I mean, like, because again, in theory, if you're really trying to win this game, you would shrink and condense it. Like, this is the battle that you and I are mentally having with this team, which is like, what about this today made any sense? Like, you're dropping back, like, you're sitting in your office and you're saying, no matter how ugly this gets, we need to drop this kid back 40 times. No, man. Ironically enough, I go back to what Vrabel said before the season when he was on Pardon My Take and talking about how some of those Titans teams won games they had no business winning. It was some target numbers about touches for the running back, how many plays the offense on the other team runs, and creating getting 3 of them, 3 turnovers. And like, is that the plan? Are they going into this showing the guys like, hey, we need Dorian to stay under 20 throws. We need to run for 150. And like, I think if I'm in that room or I'm thinking about where they're at, they got 66 yards on the first play and they ended up, running without the quarterback for like 107 yards between the backs. And it's like, so they can't run and they can't really throw with this quarterback. It's like, it's almost like, what are you doing? But I also don't think I like the plan. So I am at the point of this where I'm forced to believe that there is like it's not a generic game plan going on, but like, I don't think they're game planning to win. That's it. Now there's a lot of layers to that. Do we think they're doing that because of a practical approach where they're all sitting in a room talking about how do we close this season? And this is what we have to do to ensure we're out there trying, but we're not winning. That's a dangerous game to play. That's a dangerous game to play for your guys believing in what we're doing. But also, I don't think that they're good enough at that approach, that Vrabel-esque approach, to show them this and have them believe it. Like, we're going to do this. That's how we're going to win this game. So, Andrew, I don't have a for certain answer on why this looked like it looked, because again, I think Dorian is so, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but the word is incompetent at this point to do the things that they're asking this quarterback to do. They're not playing to his strength. So like, it's not really meant to be a dig at him. It's meant to so much so be like, I have no other way to feel than if they're not doing this on purpose, then they're dumb. And there's just 2 ways to go about handling this conversation. But it is a bit paradoxical for us to be like, they need to lose these games, but I'm really mad at the game plan, because are they trying to do the same thing? I think we have to at least consider that is a way to go about this without outwardly telling your guys in the coaches meeting, like in a players meeting, like, we're not trying to win. Like, hey, this is like something we believe we can do, and we're going to see it, or we're going to test it with Dorian and see what he can do. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's tricky. It's all very layered, but I don't think you like that Vrabel statement about how they go about that stuff, which is not rocket science. There's a lot of really good motivators who go about approaching it this way. Hey, they'll write up on the whiteboard those things, right? 20 or less, 150, 3, 60 plays. Like that's just ways of telling your guys, these are the numbers we have to hit to win this game. If we hit them, do you believe me? We're going to win. And they have to believe it. So like, that's just the approach you'd have to take when you're playing a guy like this. They similar to what Green Bay did earlier this year with Malik Willis, who just cannot operate the same offense as Jordan Love, but they curtailed it to what he could do and found a way to get it done. It just doesn't, and it doesn't feel like they're in the world of trying to do that. Or if they cannot figure that out and you're somebody making the decisions about this group and you go talk to them, why did you guys do this? This doesn't make any sense. Then they're fireable at that point, but we don't know that answer. So.
Right. No, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I think it's an interesting area to be in where the offense is bad enough that you're tempted to believe that it's bad on purpose, because it's hard to believe the alternative, which is that they're this bad at getting a player and a team, a side of the team ready to play a football game. So I think, to me, no matter how you slice it, it feels pretty yucky to be having these conversations. And I just am very hesitant to let them off the hook to the extent of saying that they like didn't put in an offensive game plan or didn't have it. That is a level of like committing to the bit of losing that I struggle to believe, but I understand the motivation for wanting to believe that, because the alternative is pretty harsh.
Yeah, we're creeping toward an answer. If they keep them, then there's maybe something underlying going on here that we have either discussed or not gotten to, but I feel like we're at least kind of around the green on this one. We were at least putting, but if they don't, keep them, then I think there's an obvious just displacement that's going on with your personnel to what you're trying to do. And, I sent to the group today, like I just don't understand where Ken Dorsey's like approach is with all of this. I've gone through it and I'll probably do more about this in a deeper level, but, yeah, man, it was really bad. It was really hard to watch, and it's worth talking about it again. What I posted, like there have been since 2004. I was looking at it too. I'm like, man, they got a lot. I was thinking about this. They got a lot of games where they've scored like 7, 14 points. Let's look at 18 as a fine line. The Jacksonville win where they scored 18. How many times have they scored 18 points or less in a game? and they have 12 of those right now. There are only 2 teams who have had 14 of those, one of which was like the 09 Browns, 14 of those in the past 20 years of NFL football. And the Browns, Dolphins, Ravens coming, hard to see them getting to 18 points in either of those games. So you're talking about a historically bad offense in the year 2024. In the 5th year, not a first-year guy, learning new people, bad roster, not committing a ton of money to it yet. They got like $150 million in cap space next year. We'll see what they can do with all of it. No, this is a group who you can't even really lean into a major injury that caught them by surprise. The tackles being out a little longer, sure, but the quarterback who was healthy to start the year, awful, gets hurt. You get a little better quarterback play. And there's just nothing. There's no crutch. There's no crutch. It literally is like you've fallen down. You can't land on anything. But that is the, if you want to know why it gets to the point why the head coach is fired at some point, you cannot be historically bad and expect is a safe word. Like even think you're going to keep your job at that point. So getting him to keep this job at this point, 5th year into this process, feels like it would be an upset at this point, to be completely frank.
I agree with that. And I think it continues to be shocking, the lack of noise around the team about this stuff. But I think that all just comes down to how the owners and so on and so forth want to handle the last few weeks. But I do think it's hard to look at what they've done over the course of the season I think you made a great point in bringing up the age of the roster, the experience level of the roster, the money being spent on the roster at the beginning of the year, the most expensive roster in NFL history to be at this point. It really, there's just not a way to make it make sense. Like you said, there's not an explanation. So I know that these are all things that we've talked about, but it's hard to know what else to talk about when you're wrapping up a 24-6 loss in a 3-12 season.
No, there's no level of like, we'll watch the film and talk it through in terms of who played one didn't. I thought Isaiah McGuire, there are pieces that keep showing that they can be a part of this, right? Like
there's talent on the team.
We've gone through wide receivers we think are good despite today's performance that we predicted. We know David can play. We know there's parts of this offensive line that can be functional. To replace all 5 of those guys. There's 3 I think are well worth keeping. The center and left tackle is a mystery to me. And then defensively, Isaiah McGuire keeps getting better, keeps performing well. Miles gets his 100th sack. That's awesome. First player to get 100 sacks before the age of 29. It's a little off-putting because of what has gone on with his like ultimatum stuff that we agree with. Like it's not, what he said is not unfair for a guy who is, pushing a Hall of Fame pace and just wants a chance to play in super and meaningful NFL games, and he just wants to know the Browns play. I don't think anything he said was out of line at all, period. And you don't, I had actually sent something to you guys about like one of the main NFL news aggregator accounts posted, then someone put like future Buffalo Bill. I'm like, I hate seeing that stuff because it would really suck to watch that come to fruition. But anyway, that's awesome for him. Really cool. And like Juwan Briggs seems like he's a decent player early on here. Got to see a little more of that. Mike Hall had another nice game, 5 tackles, a sack, a couple pressures. So I thought Mike played well. Those guys are proving to be a part of this. And then, Jordan Hicks at his age is playing really good football. I think he could be a nice part of that linebacker room next year. I thought Devin Bush had a nice game. So, and Denzel's obviously good. And I thought Martin Emerson had a better game. There are pieces here. Like it is not, need to be delicate. I think that the mental fortitude, right word, of this team is broken. That part of it getting fixed in a world where somebody, if it's Kevin or whoever, or they reapproach this thing, I don't know who's doing it. It could be a different voice, but if you can fix the mental psyche of the group, and it could be fixed by just having a better quarterback, it could, because then there's you get a better running back in the draft to play with Jerome Ford. You reapproach some of the things you're doing offensive line wise, and you kind of change your approach to some schematic things. Like it's not impossible to see them turn it around and have a good year next year. But I do think that there's a the physical part of these players being good is there. We know they can play. I was actually thinking about this with the 12-2 Vikings. I can't name 5 players on that defense. I can't. There's like a few I can name, but like getting deep in the weeds on like just knowing Vikings defenders can like obviously they have off names on offense because you pay more attention to offense and stuff, but like the Browns turning it around to be a decent team and above average to even good team next year is not crazy, but they have to figure out the mental fracture that has gone on with this team all year and the parts of your roster that are swinging to the pendulum of just underperforming. So to me, that's the biggest part of this. And I don't think that's right. Like, I guess I'm getting at Andrew's, like, I know Miles is talking about totally tear it down and rebuild it. I just don't think it has to be that. I think you got to make a bunch of really tight financial good decisions because of the hampering that they've done to themselves and really augment some things. And there's some strategic post June 1st cuts that need to happen, but it's not impossible to see these guys have a nice draft and like put some pieces together that make this a functionable group again. It's not easy. They got huge decisions at like all the way top to bottom, and you know, the top two being who's leading the organization at coach and who's the quarterback and all that stuff. Like, those are huge, and it's not to hand wave that away, but like, I'm just saying the pieces are not broken. It's not that fractured. Whereas you look back at the 17 going into 18 roster and you're like, that's just not a very talented group. They have talent, but they're mentally fractured and they need to find someone to invigorate it.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting part of the offseason conversation. And I think one of the things you and I want to do longer term, Jake, is kind of go position by position and talk about, you know, you mentioned the defensive line. We're tough on Andrew Berry, some of the talent stuff, but you got to say Isaiah McGuire looks like a player for that level of draft pick, 4th round draft pick. Well, you talk about Jawan Briggs being a 7th rounder. That's the stuff you're looking to see. By the end of their rookie season, are they able to get onto the field and earn some snaps? And that's how you kind of judge progress for young NFL players. And so seeing that happening for some of the defensive players is encouraging. There's some other players on the offensive side of the ball that you would like to see more from, and it hasn't happened. So you're finding that balance. I think going position by position and figuring out which of these players maybe we think we have a good gauge of what their talent level is. Like you said, they're playing talent level on the field, not what their effort and scheme looks like in this system with these coaches, right? Because that's part of it too, is we know this firsthand. The 2022 defense, personnel-wise, was largely the same as the 2023 defense. You go from Joe Woods to Jim Schwartz with a different emphasis, and it looks like a different unit, but it's mostly the same guys. Mm-hmm. So how much for next year, if you did make changes, presuming that they did make changes, how much for next year would you even need to change from a personnel standpoint, or are you mostly talking about getting the same guys to do different things? I think it's one of the most interesting questions the Browns face this offseason.
No doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. I mean, you're talking about a frustrating season that I just think that we have gone through this so thoroughly. There's more to do on this topic, but you know, pick a quarterback 13 to 18 and say he's a Brown this year. Would they be a team that is fighting potentially in the forefront of making the playoff? I just think that the quarterback play has been that bad. Now, there's a conversation to be had about the fractured nature of this run game that is very important because that is a huge element here. But you can trace so much back to the way they structured around a quarterback for years, 2 years now, that has just not worked for them. And they lost their identity of what they wanted to be as an offense without it. And, you know, to your point about the defense, do I think they can run it back defensively, Andrew, and have success? Yeah, I mean, I do. I think they could be a little better. I don't think they have to be like, we talked about this like middle of the week last week. I don't think they have to be a top 5 group again, but can you be top 12? Because you win a lot of ball games in the NFL, top 12. And we all know that it's up and down defensively based on schedule and some of the other things that come into play at the playing teams at the right time. But also, you know, the stable nature of offense. The Bengals are just a fun example to look at. They're probably going to miss the playoffs for 2 straight years, both sides of the football being the reason. 1 year, Joe Burrow's hurt, and it's not like Jake Browning was awful. He was okay. And then the next year, this year, they've just lost a bunch of ball games that the quarterback at damn will be the MVP, but the defense has been so broken and they missed important plays. So, I mean, you know, that's the nature of it here. Sometimes you gotta piece it together at the right time, and you got to make enough of those winning plays. But the Browns are beyond the point of fracture to like, it's here and there, a couple plays here and there. It's not. They need a mental overhaul. I really do. Whereas I don't think Cincinnati does. I think they just had a bad year defensively, and they can fix it and keep moving forward. Their offense is going to be consistent enough with Joe and those guys. They're, you know, it's not telling anything that's secretive here, but like that group you trust more, but like the Browns need to reevaluate everything around that. And then they got a huge thing to figure out if there's even a pathway, maybe be in the 4th pick. They love a quarterback now that becomes a bit more realistic. You don't have to maybe give up, if you're going from 6, 7, 8, 9 to 2 or 3, it's crazy. You're moving up 1 pick. You're giving up probably a 2nd round pick or something to do it, but it's not impossible if you absolutely are in love with, whoever jumps up the board. Maybe it's Cam Orton, maybe it's waiting another year. I don't know, but you put yourself in a better position to do whatever it takes to kind of get to that point of realization.
I think that does sum it up pretty well, Jake. You mentioned Myles Garrett getting his 100th sack. It is worth kind of putting an exclamation point on the show by giving Myles a shout out. Yeah, it's an incredible accomplishment. Very few NFL players in the league generally are able to get to 100 sacks. So to do it in the, like you said, the short amount of time that he has is a testament to who he is as a player. And like we're talking about offseason and what this looks like going forward. I have never been a big believer in letting the players call the tune in terms of what the organization does and what moves come up. But the closest I will get is, can you make a hire? If you make a change, either at general manager or at head coach, wherever organizationally, part of what I would be looking for is not the only decision, but part of the decision would be, is Myles on board with this? Are the people we're hiring confident that they can get Myles on board, that they can be competitive in 2025 to keep him in the fold? Because I agree. I think not only from a player standpoint, but also just from a fan, from a culture standpoint, the Browns being forced to kind of tear things down from here is kind of the last thing that you want to see. So if you can find people that believe in a plan that makes this work next year, one way or the other, right. That's what it's got to be. So I think that becomes kind of a little bit of the focus as we start to talk about next week and the week after and going into the off season for the Browns and the personnel hiring and firing period.
Yeah, totally, man. And those decisions about fixing the fractured alignment of what they're doing offensively and generally the roster's fractured belief in what they're doing is it. That's what it comes down to. You're hiring either hiring or keeping a coach who is going to fix that. And if you're thinking Kevin can fix that, then what around him needs to improve to fix that? Well, if you're saying it's as simple as we got to find a quarterback that he can work with and trust and operate with and figure that out. I mean, that's what you have to do. This is just as point blank obvious as it gets, man. But yeah, to close out on Myles, man, it's like, for a draft that had Patrick Mahomes in it, you redo that draft 100 out of 100 times, Mahomes goes 1, but you don't even feel like that crazy about that because you got that player who's been that great and that productive. Listen, the hard reality is you would take, Patrick Mahomes every time if you redid it. But like, of all the Browns misses in these drafts from that decade, to have that one be the guy you get right is really kind of a nice piece of solace and like some of that tough stuff around that draft, right? Or the drafts around it and
right. Then the whole
18,
right, the whole tanking plan and the whole thing. Right. The 18 draft, not finding the quarterback of the future. Well, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are out there battling for an MVP. Yeah. All that stuff stings. And as you said, he's not even the best player in his own draft class because of the presence of Patrick Mahomes. But I think the way I would say it is it's a testament to Myles Garrett that the only player that could knock him out of the spot of being the best player in his draft class literally would have to be the best quarterback in the league. That's how valuable Myles Garrett is, because he's the best defensive player in the league, in my opinion, and still going strong. So that's a big part of, as we spin this forward, the more that we've thought about, we reacted to his comments a few days ago. I am appreciative of those comments because it's raising it as an issue that's where he stands. And I think if they do have to make a hire at general manager, at head coach, wherever, asking the question, what's your plan for getting Myles Garrett on board with what you're going to do, your vision, would be like truly in the top 3 or 5 questions that I would ask that person, because the players just don't come around that often like Myles Garrett. And so if he's got 3, 4 more productive seasons at this level, that is absolutely worth playing a role in who you hire if that's where the Browns need to go this offseason. So hats off to Myles Garrett. And honestly, I'm glad that he brought it up when he did and has kind of shaped this process a little bit. He was asked some, I think, difficult questions about how he feels about Deshaun Watson very directly in his post-game conference today. I didn't feel like that was the fairest thing that's ever happened to Miles in a post-game presser. I felt a
He
little bit
gave you
like
the answer.
a
Like
gotcha
he
moment.
gave
Yeah,
you that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. He said
Come
it
on.
politically. So now you're asking him to backtrack and vouch for a guy that he very clearly already didn't vouch for. So all of this stuff is part and parcel of having a 3-12 record is how it ends up, right? There's going to be these sorts of uncomfortable conversations, some of which play out in public, but I think I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I've got Miles back on this in terms of like, if there's somebody that can say what he said and you were like, please continue to speak up, it's Myles Garrett. So congrats to him on 100 sacks. And I'm glad that he broke the record against Joe Burrow. That's pretty cool because he has been a torment to Joe Burrow's existence since the two players have been in the league. We will be back this week with a full breakdown of everything from the Browns and Bengals game, film reviews, all that stuff at brownsfilmbreakdown.com. And obviously we'll have podcasts. It is Christmas week, so our schedule probably will look a little bit different. We'll kind of let you know what we're thinking day to day, but obviously stay tuned to the podcast and at brownsfilmbreakdown.com because there's a lot more coming. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you to Jake for joining me. Be well, everybody. Have a happy holiday and go Browns.
Go Browns.